Hello and welcome to The Last Word. On the day the trade union started a two-day nationwide strike which in many places became a forced bandh, we ask, does it serve any useful purpose or is it just an inconvenience? That's with Congress party member Abid Rasool Khan, BJP national spokesperson Prakash Javadekar, CPI MP and General Secretary of ATUK Gurudas Das Gupta and the Associate Editor of the Business Standard Meher Sharma. Gurudas Das Gupta, as far back as 1997, the Kerala High Court declared bandhs illegal. The next year, in 98, the Supreme Court endorsed that position. And in fact, in 2002, the Supreme Court went one step further and said that forced strikes were illegal. So would you accept that in forcing a strike today, you and your unions have defied the Supreme Court blatantly?
If it is so, let the Supreme Court suo motu take cognizance of it and throw us to jail. If we have violated the Supreme Court judgment, I most humbly submit, let the Supreme Court take suo motu cognizance of the same, haul us up and send to jail.
Except that, is that not an irresponsible position for you to take? You are, after all, not just General Secretary of ATUK, you're also the Lok Sabha leader of the CPI. One would think that you would be dedicated to upholding the law and upholding in particular what the Supreme Court has laid down as the law. Instead, you're defying them to send you to jail.
I am only saying you are interpreting law in your own way. People have the right to live according to the Constitution. People have the right to get the minimum wage. There is a law in the country. There is a law in the country that there should be a minimum wage. There should be provident fund. There should be SIC. There should be collective bargaining of the workers. There should be always observance of law by all the parties. If you are quoting one law, I will be quoting 101 laws which will prove that the government and the employers are at random violating the laws. If I have violated any judgment of the Supreme Court, why you are not saying that the other party has been violating also similarly?
All right.
Let me just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. As a member of Parliament from 1985, I am saying trade union has a right to go on strike throughout the country.
Absolutely.
And
I don't deny that. Just a moment. I don't deny that. Meher Sharma, there's no doubt that the right to strike is a legitimate means of protest which we as a democracy uphold. But to what extent is that vitiated by the gratuitous violence that we've seen on our screens virtually since midday today in Noida?
I think that it's quite clear that you do have a right to strike. All unions have a right to strike. What you don't have a right to in a free country is a right to impose your strikes on other people. And what we have seen here is violence that has attacked the installations of people who weren't apparently participating in the strike. Now, Mr. Dasgupta may claim, as he has claimed earlier, that these were workers, innocent striking workers who were set upon by stooges of capital or whatever. But the point remains that there appears to have been intimidation, and if the political parties behind the unions aren't responsible, the state government is responsible for not providing sufficient security to the people who weren't striking.
Prakash Javadekar, it's not just violence that has concerned people today. For instance, large parts of Kerala, much of UP virtually shut down. Elsewhere in the country, transport and banking were effectively paralyzed. Office goers were delayed. Housewives who wanted to go shopping were unable to do so. Is it justified to make the people of India suffer in this way?
Sir, people are suffering for last 5-7 years of UPA regime's mismanagement of economy. You just ask your cameraman who is shooting this show, what is his plight? Is he happy with the inflation? His real wages is going down. His living standard is going down.
So is the answer a strike that causes more inconvenience?
No, the issue is they are already suffering a lot and they are expressing it democratically. And I must congratulate 100 million workers who participated today.
Where did you pluck that figure out of?
Wherever violence has happened, 1 minute.
Where did you get this figure of 100 million workers from?
Yes.
Where does it come from?
Because they have struck down the workers. You don't know, many unorganized workers also were
What is an unorganized
strike.
worker?
They
An unorganized worker is not on
for
strike. It's
400
trade
million.
unions that are organized that are on strike.
400 million.
All right, you've just multiplied the
They
figure
are
by 4.
large quantum. Out of that, many people are struck the work. The issue is, let us understand the sufferings of those millions of workers who lost even their own wages for daily wages.
Let me stop you there.
Just one sentence.
Yeah, carry on.
No, one sentence. That justice in democracy is the ultimate thing which they should get. And this government is denying that.
Well, let me bring in Abdul Rasool Khan, who in a way is a member of the Congress party and speaks for the government. Have you forgotten, Mr. Rasool Khan, that it is only desperation and frustration that forces people to go out on strike? And is there a sense in which your insensitivity lies behind the strikes that are being caused today?
Mr. Thapar, one thing is there that we talk about democracy and we talk about the mode of getting relief for different issues, what is available. We have courts, we have parliament, we have assemblies. And the unions which are on strike also have amply representation in parliament as well as in the assemblies and in all forums of the government. And any issues of there can be addressed by the court.
You're not answering my question. There's no doubt that unions have all sorts of other means of recourse to seek the solutions to their problems. But I'm saying, have they been driven to strike by your insensitivity, by your government's failure to respond?
No, I was coming to that. Our government has not been insensitive to the issue. The Prime Minister has taken a call and he has invited the leaders for discussion. A group of ministers have been formed to discuss with them, and a charter of 10 demands have been put forward. Our government has asked for some time to address those demands, couple of demands or 3 or 4 demands of them. Maybe also part of the
Mr. Rasool Khan, the Prime Minister only appointed ministers to talk to the unions yesterday. These demands go back 8 or 9 months.
No, the Prime
That's why I repeat my question.
The unions.
Have you actually been insensitive? Have you only woken up to the problem when a strike was imminent?
We are definitely not being insensitive, Mr. Thapar. We are not being insensitive. The government is taking a serious view of it, and the Prime Minister himself inviting the union members for talks shows that how serious our government is on this. But the point which we need to address here is that all the parties or all the unions are talking about public suffering, and what about the suffering which is happening now? Our government has, the nation has lost about 20,000 crores of GDP.
Let's put that specific point to Mr. Gurudas Dasgupta. Mr. Dasgupta, you've launched yourself on a 2-day nationwide strike at a time when perhaps everyone in the country is concerned that economic growth has fallen to 5% and it's not likely to rise very fast. It could even possibly dip further. Clearly, what you're doing is a big setback to the economy when it needs nurturing and encouragement instead. Was this really in the national interest?
Will you kindly consider that 40 crore people who are the working people of the country, they are on the verge of deep human distress because of loss of wage, because of inflation, because of underpayment. Repeatedly we have raised the matter in the parliament. The Congress spokesperson is saying Prime Minister is invited. It is absolutely untrue statement. I raised in parliament, we raised in parliament. One day I spoke in the parliament in the presence of the Prime Minister.
You know, you're adding to the distress of the 40 crore by lowering the growth rate and damaging the economy. It is the poor and the vulnerable who will be most distressed.
No, you want us to undergo distress because we should not in any way destabilize the economy. How should we have a right to protest? And we have waited for three years.
All right. Just a moment.
If any damage has been, just 1 minute, if any damage has been caused to the economy, it is the insensitivity of the government, irresponsibility of the government to address the human problem of the workers that has led to the situation.
Let me bring in, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there because you're beginning to make actually a political point that needs to be perhaps put in perspective by Mihir Sharma. Mihir Sharma, in many senses, What Mr. Das Gupta is talking about is actually a protest against the economic policies of the government. It's much wider and bigger than the traditional concerns the trade unions have with their employees. Yet trade unions only represent 2% of the total workforce. The rest is either not unionized or it is actually in the unorganized sector and not affected by unions at all. So do they have a right to call a nationwide strike, firstly? And secondly, when they do call a strike, does it also prove that they've forgotten or they've lost other coercive means of getting their employers to do what they want?
Absolutely. I mean, to answer the first point, it is a failure of the union movement in this country that it has not been able to expand its reach clearly beyond the organized sector. And in fact, what they are reduced to is, rather than bargaining on behalf of the people they represent with the employers, they are trying to force a complete change in the broad economic direction of the country on the government through coercive means. Now, these are two completely different things. The first is the proper duty of a union to ensure that its workers get the kinds of wages and other benefits to which they are entitled. The second is...
And that proper duty they're failing to perform.
And that proper duty, not only are they not failing to perform, there has been a sort of devil's bargain by which most unions in this country will look after insiders, look after formal employees who are union members, and allow those who are casual to just fall by the wayside.
So that failure to perform their duty actually exacerbates the problem for those who are casual and outside the union, which is the 93% majority of the workforce.
Absolutely. And in fact, yeah.
Carry on,
no, absolutely. In fact, the unions are claiming to speak in this particular strike for members of the casual workforce, but those are precisely the people who will be most hit by the strike.
Let me try and illustrate that point, Prakash Javadekar, by putting it like this. One of the sectors of the economy that was perhaps worst affected today is the banking sector. But bank employees who went on strike are not affected by disinvestment, they're not affected by outsourcing, and certainly government bank employees and RBI employees are not affected by contract labor. So should these people have actually been out there on strike? And yet, by going on strike, people like you and me and millions of others simply didn't have access to their bank accounts.
No, sir, Karan, you are wrong. I was banker and I keep everyday touch with the banking sector. Let me tell you the reality. Today, many functions are already outsourced. Not only that, and there are contract laborers who are not getting at all justice. The most important is there is skeleton of staff remained in branches who are really working hard now without overtime. The issue is that the recruitment has been stopped effectively. The wages structure in bank is no more attractive for the young talents. There is a real leadership crisis coming into the banking sector and all financial institute sector, because to attract young talents, you need to think out of box.
Can I interrupt and point out something to you? That not just in India but internationally, banking attracts probably the cream of young talent, largely because it offers opportunities, rewards and remuneration that is unparalleled.
But
and it's not stopped. You simply have to look at where young people are going.
It is not.
Yes. Let me bring in... I'll accept your point. Millions of watching you on TV will probably be nodding their heads in vigorous disagreement. Awais Rasool Khan, let me put this to you. There are many demands that the unions are raising that are legitimate. Many of those demands have been raised for a year or two. You talked about how unions have recourse to representation in parliament or that they can approach the government. But unions actually have also a relationship with their employees and employers. And when they raise demands for months, if not years on end, and get no response, then frustration drives them to strike. It happens all over the world. And I come back. Is there an insensitivity, both at the political level and at the industrial employer level, that is failing to make the employer-trade union relationship work smoothly?
The demands which have been there, whether they are justified, whether they can be met by the government, is subject of the group of ministers which have been formed and which have already started speaking. Now the question is, how sensitive is the union towards the feeling of the common man and the suffering of the common man, and what have they taken up this issue for? When you're closing down the country, by closing down the banking and transport, it is the common man, it is the daily wage earners who are suffering. And I personally feel that the unions could have given some more time to the government to address their demands and address
How much more time? These demands have been on the table for over a year. How much more time do you want?
You know, I understand. I definitely agree with them that they have demands and they have genuine demands, like Mr. Gupta was saying, and there is a lot of workforce which have going to benefit.
Well, if you agree with them, then I take it you disagree with your government's
Mr. Karan,
slow response.
my small suggestion. My small suggestion here is, can't there be other methods of striking instead of closing down the country and burning the factories and holding the people to ransom and also looting some premises? Can't there be other methods
only if people respond to pressure, but if it's not responded to for a year and more at a time, then you eventually end up striking. That's the problem. Let's take a break at that point.
Mr. Karan, striking also has different methods by not just breaking down and burning vehicles and factories.
To be honest, I pointed out in particular what happened in Noida, but Noida is an exception. Nationwide, in fact, the strike was very peaceful. Let's not exaggerate it. Let's take a break at that point and come back and ask a critical question. When strikes happen, particularly nationwide strikes, is it the poor and the vulnerable who suffer most? And do unions really care when their policies end up driving the unorganized sector, which doesn't form part of unions, obviously straight to the wall? That's in a moment's time. See you after the break. Welcome back to The Last Word. We're discussing the legitimacy of bands versus the incredible inconvenience they cause. Mr. Das Gupta, Astocam has calculated that the 2-day band that you've called will cost the country somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 crore. I put it to you that the people who will lose out most and first are the poor and the vulnerable.
First of all,
how do you justify that?
First of all, I make one point clear. Unorganized worker is a part of the trade union movement. Our membership, as assessed by the Labour Ministry, is 26 lakhs. Out of that, 13 lakhs are unorganized labour. Therefore, unorganized labour is very much a part of the trade union.
What about my point, that the people who will suffer most are the poor and the vulnerable?
No. People suffer more because of the price rise. They have not been able to get their wage for 2 days, I agree. But more suffering for them, उनका दाल का दाम, चावल का दाम, चीनी का दाम, तेल का दाम, ये महंगाई का कारण उनको सफरिंग्स बहुत ज्यादा है.
All right, you're bursting into Hindi, but let me stop you there because this is actually an English language program.
No.
I want to bring in Mihir Sharma. Mihir Sharma, there is no doubt that price rise hits the vulnerable and the poor most, and inflation has perhaps been incompetently handled by this government. How much then of the blame for the causes that is leading to frustration and anguish lies actually with the government?
Well, I think first of all it's very important to recognize that where this inflation is coming from. A lot of this inflation comes from higher food prices, and that in fact is the consequence of government policy which has backed some of the poorest people in the country, namely the people who are cultivating the food grain.
You mean by pushing up minimum
minimum support prices. That being said, there is no question that the urban working poor has been hit hard, but I strongly doubt that they are supporting anything that stops them from earning a daily wage.
There is a question Prakash Javadekar raised right at the end of part 1 by Abid Rasool Khan, which is a very critical question. Are there not other ways that unions can pursue their demands short of going on strike and paralyzing the economy? A quick answer.
The Congress government will always like that people should wait for 5 years and they should vote out the government if they don't like. But this is not the way democracy travels. And you know Lohiya's famous saying, "Jinda ko mein 5 saal raah nahi dekh sakti." That is why we say that there is a right to strike and there is a right to legitimate protest.
Very quickly, Abid Rasool Khan, once again we come back to the fact that this is a response to the government's inability to bring down price rise, and that is something that people complain about within your party as well. Would you accept that the economic handling of your government is to blame?
I agree there is a global economic crisis. I agree that in India the price rise has taken place, but our government, being sensitive to this, has also taken up very strong measures on the fair price distribution system, that is the public distribution system. In Andhra Pradesh, we are providing rice at 1 rupee kg, and we are trying to see that the other items are also provided to the people. But my suggestion is, at this moment when the whole world is suffering economic crisis, and it was only India which could move forward and maintain the economy under the leadership of Manmohan Singh ji and the Congress government. So at this moment, my appeal, I am not saying that there is no this thing, there is definitely a right to strike, but my appeal to the unions, is don't paralyze the country, let the country go on, you have to
absolutely, Mr. Rasool Khan, we've run right out of time. The only thing I'm going to say is your claim that India is one of the few, if not, as you said, only country that's moving forward while the world's economy is paralyzed is a gross exaggeration. We are, of course, growing, but the rate of growth is shrinking. It's fallen from 8% to 5%. It could fall further. We are still moving forward, but the rate of moving forward is slower and slower. My thanks to all four of my guests for joining me. Goodbye. Good night.